9 years have passed since the world tore them apart, and still the silence between them pulses like a living thing. Cold, sharp, endless. She moves through it, wounded, forgotten a shadow among shadows. Yet something deeper than instinct pulls her forward, across ice and pain and memory, toward a road she should not trust, toward a hope she no longer understands. And far away, a man who buried the past under noise and distance suddenly hears it breathing again, in dreams, in wind, in the ache behind his ribs. He doesn't know why he slows down, doesn't know why his hands tremble as he rounds the bend, but the moment he sees her broken, bloody, crawling out of the trees, every part of him that ever dared to feel ignites with a single unspoken truth. She came back. Each morning he rose at the same hour, though he no longer had anyone to rise for, made the same bitter coffee. Though it always went cold untouched, left the second cup out of habit. Not hope his cabin was clean, quiet, orderly, the way people keep things. When chaos lives somewhere they can't reach, worn books, sat stacked beside the chair, no longer read their pages, yellowed soft with time, but still open to the same lines. He once read aloud to someone not there outside. He walked the same trail every evening, boots crushing old snow, his eyes scanning the distance for nothing and everything. Sometimes he paused by the crooked tree without meaning to, stood there for too long before shaking it off like a dream that never fully faded. And though no one would have called him lonely, he carried it like smoke under the skin, a silence too deep to name. Not grief. Exactly more like the memory of warmth in a body that hasn't felt the sun in years. It happened without warning, without words. A silence that fell, not like snow, but like a stone dropped into still water, sudden, heavy, final. One day he was there laughing, barefoot, running through alpine grass, and the next, he was a memory evaporating at the edges of thought. She didn't understand. Not at first. She returned to their places, waited for his scent in the wind, for the sound of his voice brushing through leaves. But the world stayed quiet, too quiet. Her calls went unanswered. Her eyes grew dim, not with age, but with the slow erosion of hope. Days folded into weeks, then years. She stopped calling, stopped expecting. The cliffs grew colder, the sky more distant, and though she moved through the mountains as before, something in her had broken, stayed broken. She became a shadow among shadows. Silent, swift, detached. The world had teeth now, and she learned to bare hers when needed. But inside she felt hollowed, as if the part of her that belonged to him had been carved out and never filled again. And then the arrows came, cruel metal cutting through flesh, but worse, reopening something older, deeper. Not just blood, but memory. Not just pain, but the reminder that even after all this time, loss still knew her name. She did not cry out, did not beg. She simply crawled away into the dark forest, heart thudding low and slow, as if even it had grown tired of waiting. Let me pause here for a moment. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Have you ever had someone, a person, or even an animal remember you after years apart? A connection that time just couldn't break? If stories like this touch something deep in you, make sure to follow. There's so much more ahead, and it only gets more heartfelt from here. It started with a photo not even recent, just something tucked between pages of an old book he hadn't opened in years. A faded image of a boy no older than 9 squatting beside a snow-white cub, both wild-eyed, both alive in a way he no longer was. The moment. He saw it. Something inside him cracked wide open. Not loudly, but like Thor beneath thick ice. Subtle, relentless. A memory surged of cold mornings and soft fur of trust, without words of a bond that had never asked for anything but presence. He closed the book, but the feeling didn't leave it. Followed him into sleep, into silence, into the way his hands shook when he packed the bike and left without a map. Days passed, roads blurred. He told himself it was nothing, just nostalgia, just the past, playing tricks. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. He was being pulled, not by logic, but by something older than that. A tug beneath the ribs that whispered, "Go," and he went, not sure what he was searching for, or if she'd even remember him, if she was still alive, if she'd ever been real, or just some wild childhood dream. And somewhere in that same moment, she dragged herself toward the road, pain in her bones, blood on her back, breath shallow but heart racing with something she didn't understand. A knowing, a call, and when they saw each other, time didn't slow, it collapsed. He dropped to his knees, eyes wide, hands trembling like a man facing a ghost. She looked at him through blurred vision, and in that stillness between heartbeats, they both knew it had never really ended. He didn't speak at first, just stared. Breath-caught, chest aching, eyes wide with disbelief. Like if he moved too fast, the moment would vanish. Her body was still broken, blood matted into her fur, breath rattling soft and shallow. But her eyes were clear, watching him, not with fear, not with instinct, but with something older, recognition flickering like the first ember in a dying fire. He stepped closer slowly, every movement deliberate, reverent, the way you approach something sacred. Her ear twitched. Her eyes didn't leave his, and for a second, nothing else existed. The wind, the trees, the blood, the road. It all faded. There was only that space between them, heavy with silence, full of something unspeakable. He reached out a hand, unsure if it was madness or memory guiding him, and then he whispered her name nearer. And in that instant, something shifted. Her body barely moved, but her gaze deepened, like she was seeing through him, not to his face, but to the boy he had been, the boy who once held her in his arms and swore they'd never part. Her tail shifted almost imperceptibly. A sound escaped her throat, not a growl, not a cry, something like a breath catching on the edge of memory. His vision blurred, tears, hot, fast, unstoppable. His knees hit the ground. He wrapped his coat around her like she was fire, and he was freezing. And even through the pain, even through the blood, she let him. Even after all those years, she let him. And in that silence between them, something ancient locked back into place, as if the world itself had been holding its breath for this reunion, as if time finally exhaled and whispered, "Yes, you were never forgotten." The days came slow and quiet, filled with the rhythm of recovery, not rushed, not forced, just the simple act of being near her wounds, closed little by little, flesh knitting back together under the soft press of time. But what truly mended was something deeper. Each morning she'd lift her head as he stepped outside, and he'd pause every time, not wanting to break the spell her eyes would meet. His steady, now not wild, not wary, and in that glance, he felt the tightness in his chest loosen. She began to follow him again. Not far, just a few careful steps, her presence like a shadow that chose to stay by choice. Not instinct. One afternoon, he reached out with an open palm, and she leaned into it, the weight of her head against his hand so familiar, it made him laugh, a quiet, stunned sound, like someone remembering how he used to breathe. She brushed against his side. Once on a walk, the way she had as a cub, and something broke in him, not from pain, but from the sheer mercy of being known again. Each evening she returned from the forest and curled near his porch, no leash, no fence, just trust, and every night he sat beside her, staring at the sky, not saying a word, because they never needed words. They were past that. What they had lived in, pauses, in glances, in the way her ears tilted when he shifted in his chair, or the way his hand would find her shoulder in the dark without thought. And so they healed, not perfectly, not as they had been, but as they were now, weathered whole, changed and still deeply connected in a way the world could never take back. And in that quiet shared life, he finally understood the truth. Some bonds do not break. They wait silently, faithfully, until the heart is ready to return. Some connections don't fade. They endure in the unseen spaces between time and memory. Untouched by distance or silence, they wait quietly, like roots beneath frozen ground, patient, steady, certain. And when the moment comes, they rise, Not with noise, but with a knowing presence, a glance, a breath, a shared stillness. And in that return, something shifts. Not back to what was, but forward into what can be. Because true attachment does not vanish. It transforms it, softens the sharp edges of absence, and finds its way home. Not to the past, but to the heart that never stopped listening, never stopped hoping, never stopped remembering. And in that meeting, healing begins not loudly, but deeply, quietly, completely.